aircraft. The role of air traffic control in that process, I think, might be worth a closer examination. As I say, having heard the discussion, I'll make closer inquiries into this particular occurrence.
I appreciate that. And I think Captain Woodward also made reference to a 747 incident where the pilot wouldn't have landed because of a wind shear event, given the wind at one end of the runway. But as I understand it, were procedures changed as a result of that incident? I understand maybe some time ago, but are you aware whether each airport has a different approach to dealing with weather events or the information it provides to crew?
Circumstances are different at different aerodromes, Senator, and so the particular standards that apply, the information that's available to crews to make an informed decision about whether it's safe to take off varies from aerodrome to aerodrome. So it's one of those circumstances where there is no simple one-size-fits-all major airports answer to the set of questions. I'm not sure I can usefully add very much more, but there are those decisions about whether the information available to make informed safety decisions about takeoff and landing should be reviewed on a regular basis by those participating, the operators, the air traffic control, the aerodrome operators, and that is part of the process that goes on. It's a matter that works as much on the regulatory side with CASA as it does with us. In fact, much more so.
I don't know, Mr McCormick, whether you want to add to that in terms of the issue of the weather, that weather event in Darwin at the end of October.
That particular event, Senator, I think today's the first I've heard of that event, because we certainly haven't seen anything come our way, but we'll look and see what we have. As for air traffic controllers displaying weather or what they see with the TATS system, Mr Hood was previously a senior manager air traffic controller by profession with Air Services, so perhaps he can add a few technical issues of what you can see with the weather radar, etc.
Yes, Senator Greg Hood. There are two systems basically in most air traffic control towers. You have the radar system itself, so you can see the aircraft paints. You also have the Bureau of Meteorology weather radar, which in itself paints the thunderstorms. So that usually is based at the airport itself. So in fact, Darwin, for example, it might be showing the thunderstorm clouds further out, but there's no way of telling the intensity, to my knowledge, of what's actually over the airport itself.
Right, and I think Mr Dolan will get back to us as to the extent of that. Mr McCormick, can I go to the document that was tabled, which I think the committee provided to you earlier today, in relation to the the human factors section special fatigue audit, Jetstar, dated the 10th of May 2010. It's a document that's been provided for the purpose of this inquiry. Obviously, it's headed as a staff in confidence document, but you can understand why I think some of my colleagues have been concerned about the content of that report. The audit makes references to the risk management, the risk assessment of Jetstar in relation to fatigue matters, and it has been quite highly critical of that. It makes reference to a reactive system of managing fatigue, heavy reliance on the CAO 48 exemption, refers to unacceptable fatigue risks not being identified and managed, loose interpretations and applications of rostering practices, and it goes on to make reference to mechanism, a lack of support for flight crew decision-making if already it's fatigued, and it also refers to a perceived punitive nature of taking actions within the airline. So it's highly critical, and actually makes reference to recommends that the CAO 48 exemption should be withdrawn. Can you advise, as a result of this audit being prepared for CASA of the 10th of May 2010, what steps were taken following that audit, and whether there have been changes with Jetstar since that time?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I would say at the outset that, as you've correctly pointed out, this is an internal document. We don't normally look at internal documents. However, this audit report
it's
itself...
been given to the committee, so we've got an obligation to raise it.
Appreciate that, Senator. This audit was undertaken over the 6th to 9th of April 2010 following complaints that from Jetstar flight crew based in Darwin. The audit was led by a safety systems inspector, Mr Cook, who was no longer employed by CASA, who authored this part of the document. His document was incorporated in the final report, which was dated on the 10th of May 2010, and which was given to Jetstar on that day. You might note the date of the 10th of May is also the date on this particular document that's been tabled here, and this whole document arrived to the actual review quite late in the process. However, the general intention of this review, looking at what was involved in here, some of it was supported by evidence, some of it wasn't, some of the conclusions, the basic principles that were in here, the concerns were carried forward into the report. If you just indulge me for a second, sure. Senator. The Special Audit Report concluded with 12 findings which are associated with reliance on reactive reporting for fatigue risk matters, the Jetstar CA48 exemption appearing to act as the primary means of managing flight crew fatigue risk, and the impact of commercial imperatives on the interpretation of flight and duty time legislation, adequate risk and fatigue management. We required a more proactive fatigue risk management program was demonstrated to be in the concept stage by Jetstar, and Jetstar responded to all the findings and made undertakings with respect to the continued development of their FRMS and revision of CAR 48EX application for domestic and international duties. The fatigue risk management protocols for ops control application, formalising of requirements for extended duty periods were addressed by Jetstar. The scheduled AOC audit we then carried out was in May 2010, so very closely after this special audit had been done in relation to Darwin. There are 8 findings made in relation to the SMS, Safety Department resourcing, SMS training and internal audit. A finding was made with respect to fatigue risk producing conditions for the cabin crew. All these findings were satisfactorily addressed, and given that it had only been a few weeks since the special audit, follow-up actions resulted was seen as satisfactory. The formal SMS capability assessment of Jetstar will be conducted within the Jetstar AOC audit, which is in May this year, scheduled for May.
So the document you refer to, so the document that the committee has is part of a report that CASA has prepared?
Correct. There were 3 members of the audit team.
Sure.
The author of this document was part of that team. It was submitted to the lead auditor who produced the overall document, which was given to Jetstar. And did the overall,
Chair, we may call for that document. Is that do you say that's a confidential document or it's a public document?
No, the document. No, this was an internal document, not confidential as such. The one that you've tabled, the actual report that went to Jetstar, we can table that if the chair indulges.
Yes. Well, that would be very useful. But to what extent did the final report? But that wasn't a published report, though, was it?
Well, generally our audit reports, of course, go to Jetstar, but we don't generally release the reports.
No. This isn't something that we could have found on the web.
That's what I'm saying. No, we don't normally.
No. I just want to make clear that that the final report. To what extent did the final report to Jetstar incorporate the concerns of this fatigue audit?
Well, that's just what I just read out, Senator. Yeah. We actually made 12 observations, 12 findings. Audit observations, AOs, which were associated with reliance on reactive reporting for fatigue risk matters. The Jetstar CAA 48 exemption appeared to be acting as a primary means of managing flight crew fatigue risk, the impact of commercial imperatives on the interpretation of flight.
Is there a copy of that report? Is there a copy of that report we can obtain shortly?
Certainly.
Just don't know whether we could get copies for the committee.
And again, perhaps I'll ask Greg Hood, who's the Executive Manager of Operations, who was.
It's just that it would be useful to refer to that in the because this obviously is a document that's caused some concern. In relation to this particular report, for instance, the fatigue audit said that no evidence has been provided to date to demonstrate appropriate strategic assessment of fatigue risk. Is that something that was put to Jetstar at the time?
Sorry, I missed the last question.
In terms of the key findings from CASA, the human factors, no evidence has been provided to date to demonstrate appropriate strategic assessment of fatigue risk. Was that something that was put to Jetstar in the context of is there an appropriate strategic assessment of fatigue risk?
in the final report. I'll have to wait till I get my copy back to
Okay,
read it.
all right.
But
Well, perhaps
Mr. Hood can add
perhaps
add more.
rather so that this isn't tedious, there were a number of findings. They weren't numbered, but some, I think, 12 findings. For instance, finding 2 was that no evidence of proactive fatigue risk assessment when the new Darwin base was established. Is that something that was put to Jetstar in the context of the audit?
Senator, yeah, once again, in terms of the report that you have in your possession, it was the input of a third of the team member to the final report, and so I would need to refer to the final report to have a look at what the lead auditor considered to be supported by
What do you mean
evidence.
by that? There was an input of a third. Does that mean that you're trying to minimise the report, or
No. There are 3 different members of the team, each with different skill set, and what normally happens in the context of an audit team is
what
when
are the
they...
3 skill sets?
This particular case, it was a jet pilot, a 767 flying ops inspector. It was a safety systems inspector, somebody that has expertise in looking at systems within airlines, you know, fatigue management systems, safety management systems, and the human factors expert.
You had an expert in human what?
Human factors, the psychology of...
I'd be interested to run into him.
Okay, it's just that, you know, as soon as this report was tabled to the committee, we provide you a copy, and it would have been perhaps useful to see the final report. But it goes on to say one of the third finding was that there was a reactive system for managing fatigue with a heavy reliance on CAO 48 exemption. That was something that was put to Jetstar.
Yes, I believe it was, Senator.
And you're satisfied, it says that the system is too reliant on incidents to occur and for reports from flight crew to determine whether there is an unacceptable fatigue risk. Is that something that what you believe has been addressed since that time?
Senator, there were 12 findings from the final audit report, and it's my information of each of those findings was satisfactorily addressed by the airline.
It's worth noting, Senator, of course, that it does say in the report as well that Jetstar may have additional supporting material which has not yet been provided to the audit team to further address some of the human factors section findings. It's my understanding, without actually talking to the lead auditor here, that some of these findings which are given here in paragraph 2 were not supported by evidence.
Well, I think the report was quite careful, saying no evidence has been provided to date. Yeah. In other words, there was no positive evidence of, for instance, an appropriate strategic assessment of fatigue risk. It also refers to a scientific review of Darwin-based flight crew rosters, indicates there are predicted levels of fatigue risk that require further review by Jetstar. In the absence of sufficient proactive fatigue risk assessment practice by Jetstar, there may be unacceptable fatigue risks that are not being identified and managed. Has that been attended to since that time? Mr Hood or Mr McCormick?
Senator, I'd like to take that on notice if I can. I'll just go back and review Jetstar's response to our audit recommendations.
All right. Rather than going through... Well, for instance, one matter that did concern me was that there remains reluctance from a number of flight crew to report fatigue risk and or to say no to an extension of duty based on the perceived punitive nature of taking such actions. We've heard from Captain Woodward on behalf of Jetstar pilots. I've heard from a number of pilots who say that they are very reluctant to speak out because they're concerned about their jobs. How does CASA deal with the issue of a perceived punitive nature of taking such actions?
Well, Senator, I think we've got to be very cognizant of the fact that we're a statutory authority and a regulator, and we have to work on facts and be facts-based. If we have whistleblower type approaches, then that may not be the right term to use for somebody who just wishes to report, but if I could use that as a working term, as I think I've said in this place before, my view is that we support those people and we take their allegations seriously.